Hi guys, and welcome to another monster review. Today I'm going to do a more PvP orientated monster, and today we'll be discussing Copper. So a lot of people have seen my Copper in action. Typically, if you've watched my my previous Guild War videos, he's been slowly improving his damage. More recently, he's been doing about 50k on average per Thunderstrike. And the highest he has reached was just over 51,000. It only happens every once so often because there's a variation in his damage, but on average it's about 50k. And these are the sort of stats that I have on my Copper, which allows him to do that kind of damage. Keep in mind as well though that in Guild Wars there's flags, and my flags are like moderately upgraded, so that will affect how much damage he does. So in the demonstrations that I'm going to show, this is going to be in arena with the arena leader for Chloe. Hopefully that will be similar to what he typically does, but outside of arena he may not do as much. Outside of Guild Wars he may not do as much as you would expect, and that's due to those flags. Okay. Now, there are many ways to build Copper. Similar to most nukers, you're just aiming to get certain thresholds of stats. The main stat that you can be worried about though is crit rate. So depending on what team you're gonna use your Copper in, you adjust your crit rate accordingly. So, for example, I typically will use him with Randy and Chloe, and therefore with Randy's buff, I only need 70% crit rate to make sure I crit against everyone. Okay. Now, if you use, there are obviously variations that you can use. Now, another variation you could possibly use that I know some people use is Delphoid lead with Basalt as the defense buffer. And for that build to work, you would need a 100% crit rate Copper. So therefore his other stats will probably suffer a bit because you need a certain amount of substats specifically to get his crit rate up that high. Now, for that reason, you can use any set that you want. Like similar, you've probably heard of people using broken solutions and stuff like that. Same idea really applies to Copper, but because your Copper probably won't share the defense like nuker sort of runes compared to other nukers who would share all the attacker type runes, right? So you probably only have one really good set of defense based nuker runes, and for me I give that to Copper. Right? That's why my Copper can do so much damage, is I give him the absolute best runes I have. And for that reason, and also they're also rage based runes, so I'm getting the most out of the set bonuses as well as having really good substats on them. So I'm just going to show the runes real quick. Okay, so obviously you focus on defense percent, crit rate and crit damage to maximize damage. Attack percent is actually also fine, it will still scale his damage, so don't be afraid to have attack percent substats. And yeah, if you can grind them all up, that will obviously help as well. And one other important thing to note is the slot 3 flat stat defense is worth maxing, just because every bit of defense helps his damage, so you may as well max that out. It's probably also a good idea to max the slot 1 as well, but I haven't gotten around to it. For me personally, I probably want to look for a better rune. Ideally similar crit rate, but I want more crit damage on it instead. Okay, so if you have good ones that you think you'll keep for long term, then I would definitely suggest to max them out for more damage. Okay, so that's his stats, and I'm going to show you how he does. It's only against a rival, but because his Thunderstrike ignores defense, it doesn't really matter what level the opponent is and how much defense they have. So I was going to show him in an arena setting. Okay, so this is with Chloe's defense leader, which only works in arena, so just keep that in mind. In Guild Wars, you will typically have Randy as the leader he's got a speed buff, which helps the Chloe, but it doesn't really help the Copper as much. So we do his Thunder Strike and 50k. So that's pretty much similar to what I would normally get in Guild Wars, and this is really good for sniping those really tanky beast monks, Hwadams and stuff like that. Especially because Ignore defense doesn't care about will runes, and that's probably the most important thing, because I typically will use that against things like Fielmars, Hwadam and Chasun. And for those teams, Hwadam will usually be on will, just to help him not get one shot straight away, and gives the Fielmars more time. But I bring Copper against this team because he'll just ignore the will runes and just kill him in one go. But this won't be for everyone. It depends how much damage your Copper is capable of. I think the average Copper will probably do around 42 to 43,000 with like mediocre runes, which is still pretty good, but at the top end a lot of Hwadams will have more HP than that. Now I'm just going to go through a few other units that also work well with Copper. There's one here. Oh no. So this is a semi-recent unit, Nat 4, called Immensity. This is another unit similar to Randy that will work well with Copper, and because this Marching Shout will fill up the attack bar as well as doing the defense buff and crit buff. The disadvantage is that it's only for 2 turns, but if you can nuke them straight away, you should be okay with 2 less turns. The cooldown is also a lot longer, so unless he's max skilled, the cooldown will be fairly long. But if you can endure through the remaining couple guys, or if you bring another nuker, like another defense based nuker to also attack, like Bulldozer or something like that, then you can probably kill 2 things fairly quickly, and then you don't have to worry about them killing you back. Okay, now to use Immensity with Copper, Immensity needs to be really fast, so you probably put him on Swift runes. That basic idea is you want your Immensity to move first, buff your Copper up, Copper nukes one person, and then you're starting the match off ahead already. Okay. Now any defense buffer works, as I said. So you can still use things like Basalt or Talc even as well. They both work because of the Polar Roar. It's a heal as well, so in situations where you need to endure through like another couple of bruises or something. For example, if you bring it against, say, Veramos, Ritesh, Kumar, right? You probably nuke one of them down, but you still need to endure through a couple of beast monks hitting you. So something like one of the Mammoths plus Delphoid should help you outlast them long enough so you can Thunder Strike again. Now I was going to go through a few other things. For Copper's skills, okay. Now typically I will use Pulverize most often, okay, when Thunder Strike is on cooldown. The reason being is I want to stun to reduce the amount of damage I'm taking, whereas this Spinning Smash, while it does, it's a defense break, but it's very unreliable, 50% and chance to land, and Copper probably isn't going to be built with much accuracy, so I don't find he lands this very often enough. But in the cases where he does land it, it is nice for using Randy as well, because if you have Randy in there, he can use Chain Fire. Just show you. So Chain Fire, this has a bit of RNG involved. Sometimes he can go nuts and one-shot people with it, but I typically will only use it if Copper has defense broken someone. Now, if you're versing something like a Field Mars Hwadam Chasun, you will probably want to be trying to stun him as much as possible, because you don't want him to get too many turns. He might violate and kill you, so the stun will help, reduce the chance of this happening. So for that reason, you also see me on Randy using the first skill more often, because this one has a chance to ignore defense, so it doesn't care if the opponent has defense break or not. Okay, now when using Randy with Copper, I would recommend using Violent, right? And Revenge is probably one of the better choices. You can use something like Will or Shield, just to help out. Like if your Chloe is on like Swift Will, and you can't afford to put a shield set on that, just in case there's an Orion or something, then you can put the shield on him and on Randy if you want. But I do like Revenge a lot, because typically I will use it against these mid-range teams where Chloe should buff first. Like there should be nothing moving before Chloe, and then while he's got Fnatic up, their units, or any water units will start trying to hit him, or any AoEs will attack the whole group, and he can proc Revenge out of that. And with his first skill, it's not as good now because they nerfed the skill a bit, in terms of like 2 shots, both of them they have separate chances of ignoring defense, whereas before his old version was 1 shot, and that 1 shot had the ignore defense chance, right? So now it's like half as effective, but it still can do a lot of damage if he procs. Okay, so that's why I like Revenge on him. But as I said, he doesn't have to be Revenge. You can use really any offset you want. Now Chloe, my current build is a standard Swift Will, okay, but I think I'm gonna probably change it towards maybe Shield Will and something else at some point. That way I can potentially use it against Orions if I make her fast enough, and that way she'll have the shield plus the Fnatic on everyone to help stop the Orion from removing immunity from Copper, and that way I can potentially use it against Orion comps. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Alright, so that's typically how I would use the Randy, Copper, Chloe team. Now I'm just going to discuss what it's good against. I can't really show this since we don't have any Guild War right now. I can't really show what I would typically use it against, but if you watch my Guild War videos, you'll probably see me use it against, as I said, those like semi-slow teams where there's no like attack bar booster, no Bernard, no Orion, no Tiana, that sort of thing, right? So things like the double Beast Monk teams, it's really good against, especially for the Ritesh, like Ritesh Kumar, right? Because with the team, I'll just bring the team back up. So with the team, you can see there's one wind guy and 2 fire guys, right? Now, Ritesh will only hit Copper because it's the only neutral unit for him to attack. He's not going to attack the Chloe or Randy because he's got elemental disadvantage. And Kumar, same idea, he's got elemental advantage on Copper, whereas for the other 2 it's neutral. So unless the neutral guys, like the Chloe and the Randy, if their defense broken, then Kumar will hit them. Otherwise, as long as you can avoid the defense break from Ritesh, which is generally pretty likely, because well, not only because they're elemental advantageous against him, so he has a good chance to glance and not apply the debuff, but also because Chloe's got immunity buff as well. Even though it won't last, it's not going to be permanently up, but for a fair amount of time you can expect to have the immunity up when retest tries to armor break. So Copper will take all the damage from those two. So depending on what the other unit is, the third unit, usually I see it paired with Veramos. So usually I'll kill the Veramos first because I don't want him to study my team, and also he's the only guy that will, like, you can't predict who he's gonna hit. So in that instance I will kill the Veramos first. Sometimes it might be something like a Wind Monkey. Wind Monkey I would kill first as well. Because I know that Ritesh and Kumar shouldn't be able to kill Copper, as long as I can keep the Copper's defense buff up. Speaking of which, while I'm just discussing keeping the defense buff up, it's good for Randy to be on Violent, because the defense buff, it lasts 3 turns, but it's a 4-turn cooldown. So if he was not on Violent, right, there will be 1 turn where he won't be able to buff, and that means there'll be a window where Copper won't have the defense buff up. But having Violent, even though you're relying on a proc, it gives him better chances to keep it up, because as long as he procs 1 Violent, then he's going to be ahead on the cooldown recharge, and therefore he'll be able to buff before Copper moves again, like before he loses the buff, right, I should say. And just keep in mind to make sure that Randy is slightly faster than your Copper. Now Copper has very low base speed, and you probably won't have much speed substats on your runes for him, because you'll probably be focusing more towards damage, right? But just make sure that they're not too far apart as well. So as you can see for my Copper, he's on 107 speed. So if I give no speed substats to my Randy, then he'll still be ahead, right? So just make sure he's slightly ahead. And obviously make sure he's got 70% crit rate, so that he's got max crit rate when he's got his buff on himself. Okay. Now teams to avoid. Pretty much any team that has a buff remover, you probably want to avoid. So any Praha, Juno, Tiana, even Bella, stuff like that. Bella you can bring against, because Bella's not guaranteed to hit, like, go for your Copper with C's, but it is a 1 in 3 chance. So usually I wouldn't, like, for me, I wouldn't risk it personally, but it's doable, because the C's itself is not as detrimental as, say, a Katarina's, Katarina losing the Fanatic buff, right? Because Copper, even though he loses the immunity and stuff, he can still do stuff. Like he doesn't need the immunity or invisibility to make his abilities work, unlike Katarina. Just so long as he doesn't get, like, as long as the Bella doesn't Violent proc straight after and then go for the defense break on it, then he's okay. So that's why, I mean, it can be a risk that you can take, but I would avoid it if you can. Okay, but that also means what makes Immensity pretty nice for Copper as well. I haven't built one yet, but I know people who have, and it's a good way to get around things like Bella, because you can make your Immensity faster than an average Bella, because most Bellas, well, they should be on Violet, so you would expect them to be about maybe 210 max speed, 220 at worst. So as long as you can make a swift Immensity at least 230, you'll be fairly safe to buff Copper up before the Bella can move and kill. You probably kill the Bella first in that case. And as I said before, things like Theo, Hordam, Chasun, or any other unit that's similar with no buff removal, like Veramos, you can also use it against that sort of team. It is a little bit risky though, because Theo can go pretty nuts against you, and I find often he'll probably, like, if he procs a Violent, he'll kill your Randy. So that's a risk to keep in mind. You can still win without Randy, but it will be a little bit harder. It will just depend on how tanky their field mass is, because if it's at least like, if it's a squishy one, like say 12,000 HP, 13,000, your first skill can still just pop the Endure. But if it's like a tanky field mass, like 20k, which is a lot of high ranking players are moving towards tankier field mass these days, you might struggle against those sort of teams. So it really depends what level of Guild Wars you're fighting at. To make it a little bit safer, you can make your Randy a tankier build. So instead of like, so my one is on attack, crit damage, attack, right? But you can make it HP, crit rate, or crit damage, HP, or attack, HP, something like that. Just give him, basically just give him 2 HP runes to make him able to at least last a couple, like 1 or 2 hits maybe from the field mass. So you're unless the opponent's field mass gets really lucky with, say, double violent proc or something stupid, then Randy should be able to survive. I just realized that Rune is not maxed, but it's okay, I'll get around to it. He doesn't like, Randy is more of a secondary damage dealer, so he doesn't need like the best runes. He's mostly there for the defense buff, and then he can like poke stuff with his abilities to weaken them. One important scenario to note sometimes is if Randy violent procs after doing his defense buff turn 1. To be safe, I would usually poke whoever I'm going to Thunder Strike with Copper. Especially for units that might be really tanky because they build triple HP and stuff like that. Like for example, Ritesh, Jultan, and Hodam. Those units, even if you have a 50k Copper, they might still have just a little bit more HP than what you can do because of guild flags and stuff like that. So it is always worth just poking whoever you're gonna hit, just to be safe, on the safe side. Okay, so I think that about covers Copper quite thoroughly. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in comments. I will reply to them as soon as I can. So thanks guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.